What's up, good people? This is your host, Neil Real, and this is the Apostate Apple broadcast. Today, we're talking about how to know if you or someone you know is sexually repressed. This is going to be kind of an extensive overview of sexual repression, the origins, some ideas that people have, the physical and emotional issues that you can see in somebody or yourself, the feelings that you have, and some of your actions. And then the next episode, we'll talk about how to overcome sexual repression. So let's get right into it. But before we do, we're back. Let's define repression or repress. This means to hold back or prevent by an act of volition, to put down or subdue by force, to end, limit, or restrain as by intimidation or other action. So when it comes to sex, this is what's happening to your sexuality. Sexuality is energy, and sexuality does not start at intercourse. It starts well before then. So it's the desire to have sex. It's the attraction to someone. It's the flirting process. It's touching. It's how you dress. It's how you carry yourself. All of this has to do with sex. It's all connected to sex. So what are the origins of sexual repression? Well, outside of religion that we already talked about, another way you could become sexually repressed is through sexual trauma. Okay, rape, molestation. Another way sexual repression can be caused is through harsh social education designed to prevent pregnancy and diseases. So in some cases, schools will bring in somebody to scare the students into being more mindful of their sexual activities. And in some cases, those stories that they tell could lead the child to be repressed because you're like, wow, oh my God, I'm going to catch this and I'm going to die. Or I'm going to be pregnant and nobody's going to take care of me. And I'm going to be with this baby. It's something that's really harsh. Now, most of the time they don't go that far, but in some cases, if you got the wrong person, they could go too far and that child could take it a certain way to where they become sexually repressed. Another way is through perverted gender roles. And this is kind of linked to religion because they teach this. So women are taught that they are to trade their sex, their vagina, the vaginal access for protection and provision, but they're not allowed to enjoy sex unless they be considered a whore. There's this thing within Christianity and sometimes even in Islam where that's the case and that's how women think. Now, in response to that programming, the men believe that the woman's body is for them and her pleasure doesn't matter. Okay, so he can just go in there, jackhammer the pussy, have an orgasm and get out and leave and think nothing of her pleasure at all. And this is happening a lot. And these ideas are not even just in religion. They can be spread to the secular world as well. And they don't understand where this came from. And it came from the church. You see, at one point, the church, the Catholic Church, had a grip on the world. They ran the world. And so with these perverted gender roles and this view of sex where a woman just is allowing her body to be used in exchange for protection and provision, and the man does not care about her pleasure, another way somebody could become sexually repressed is repeated bad consensual sex. So they say to themselves, well, why should I have sex if it's going to be this way? If it's only going to be a 3-minute thing, I may feel pleasure, I may not, I may feel pain. Why indulge myself in this? This is usually happening for women, but men can get to this place as well. And this could be linked to perverted gender roles where in the case of women, these men that they're dealing with all have this view that her pleasure doesn't matter. And she doesn't know that she should feel good. And so she's just approaching sex with the urge to do it. But every time she does it, it's this experience that's just not that exciting. And so her subconscious begins to get programmed. And then it says, well, why have sex? Let's not even have sex. At any point in time where she does come across a man who actually is going to give her some pleasure, she may be resistant because she's thinking it's going to be the same way, and she may not be open to receive that. And this is all coming from sexual repression. So here's some of the ideas people have that indicate the presence of sexual repression. They criticize certain sex acts and positions. So oral sex, anal sex, titty fucking, cowgirl position, and wheelbarrow, doggy style, froggy style, any one of these sexual positions out there and sex acts, bondage. They'll talk bad about it, look at it and call it nasty. And anybody saying something like that, they could be sexually oppressed. If they think swinging and polygamy is immoral, they're sexually repressed. Those are just more ways people are having sex. A married couple may share their partner with somebody else for a time on the weekends, and they swap partners or whatever. Polygamy is having multiple wives, in some cases, or multiple husbands, or having an open relationship. Anybody that's looking at that and saying that's immoral is sexually repressed because they have a viewpoint that's limited. You can only have sex with one person at one time, and that's who are you to say that? And another indication is they think homosexuality is immoral. So anybody that thinks that has some form of sexual repression. Another one, they think a woman who has lots of sex with different men is immoral. This comes from the church. Once again, I talked about the whore Madonna complex, how they vilified women who love sex and have a lot of sex and with different men. Why does it bother you that she's having a lot of sex? Because the church taught you that. Some women think that they are not valuable because they are not virgins or have a quote-unquote high body count, which leads to low self-esteem. And so once again, this comes from the church. The church teaches women that they should be virgins until marriage, and women who are not virgins are considered tainted. And so for women that buy into that and really accept and believe that, they walk around with a low self-esteem. They don't see themselves as valuable, and it's an unfortunate sign of sexual repression. Well, it's linked to sexual repression. Another thing is they think a woman or a man who dresses sexy is immoral. So this has often happened in the church. Some girl comes into church and she may have a short skirt on or her back may be out. And here comes some church mother scolding her. Really envy, in my estimate. Baby, you need to close that up. What you doing? Your legs are all out. This is not the place to. This ain't no club now, baby. That's a form of sexual repression, and she thinks that some level of skin showing, this is wrong. And so here she is scolding this young girl. Another thing is that they think their body is unattractive or unworthy of sex. So this can happen to you if you're very, very sexually repressed, because the body is sexual and the body, it broadcasts sex. For somebody to look at their own bodies and says, I'm not worthy of sex, that's sexual repression. And I know that somebody listening to this will say, well, no, there's people who really need to get in shape. And I would even counter that. If you go to Instagram, there are women who are overweight, who look like Jabba the Hutt from Star Wars, with tattoos all over their body, with thousands of followers, and men lusting in the comment section. Okay? You can pretty much look any kind of way as long as you're sexually confident. And you say, I'm sexy, and you really believe it and mean it from your core, you will attract people. And people will be genuinely aroused by you and sexually attracted to you. Here are some physical and emotional issues that could be linked to sexual repression. Chronic tension in your body. So, in your neck, shoulder, hips, or back pain. This is a result of carrying too much sexual energy and you haven't released it. Okay? Sex is energy. You need to have an orgasm. You need to have sex. You need to express your sexuality. Another thing, nervousness and irritability. We've heard people make jokes about people who are irritable. And somebody, you just need to get laid, man. I mean, why are you always upset? And, but that's a real thing. And it's called hysteria. And this was something that was happening in the Victoria era, particularly amongst Catholic women. I remember reading about this when I was studying sexual repression and how the women were just tripping out. They're nervous, they're irritable, as they said, exaggerated emotions, erratic behavior. And it was all due to them not having sex. These young women were not having sex. And so they were spazzing out, losing themselves, just going crazy, basically. And it's because they had not had any access to sex. They were repressed deeply. Aggression. We know this as well. You can become very angry because you're not having sex. So anger and its unfortunate siblings, which is violence and rage and all that other negativity in some cases can be due to sexual repression. So we can see how strict religions, like particularly Islam in some cases, has a large occurrence of rape and assault. And I'm talking about certain sects. I'm not knocking the whole religion, but there are certain sects that may be involved in that. And because of straight up, they can't have sex. And so it's coming out some other kind of way, you know? So in your life, if you feel like you got a lot of aggression that keep manifesting, perhaps you're overly judgmental of people and argumentative or short-tempered, this could be linked to sexual repression. Erotic dreams. This is a big one. This almost always happens to people. Out of nowhere, you just have an erotic dream, which could lead to a wet dream where you end up ejaculating in your dream, or what they call a nocturnal emission. Nocturnal emissions are simply the result of not having sex. All right? So the body has to release that semen. And so it creates some type of a scenario in your mind while you're sleeping. And that's because you're not having sex. You're not releasing sexual energy. So you end up waking up with a messy bed because of this. Some people refer to this as demon sex, or demons are coming into my bedroom, and incubus and succubus. You've heard this in the religious sectors, where there are creatures that are enticing people to have sex in their dreams, or they're visiting them at night. I don't even think those things are actually real. I think that's something that Christians created or labeled because they know they can't have sex. They can't think about sex. They can blame it on a demon visiting them at night and making them have an orgasm, or making them ejaculate, or making them play with themselves and say, oh, it was the incubus and succubus that came to me. And I think that's where it came from. I'm not quite sure, but this does not happen to you when you are having sex on a regular basis or masturbating on a regular basis and releasing that sexual energy. You just don't have this happening. But this is a normal occurrence for people who are repressed. All right. So here are the feelings that you have when you are sexually repressed. You have discomfort with any form of nudity. I remember I was at a library and there was a girl who had some type of garment on where all of her side of her breast was showing. I mean, I didn't have an issue with it. I wasn't uncomfortable about it at all, but it was the librarian who called it out, and nobody's seen her. Like I didn't see her. A lot of other people just, and she's like, oh, you gotta close up you gotta cover your chest, and it's like her chest is covered. It's just the side of her breast is out. And I'm like, leave her alone. Like, why is this a issue for you? Nobody is tripping about this. And that's because I believe, like I said, when I see this stuff every day now, there's a lot of sexually repressed people, okay? They got real issues with sex and nudity and stuff like that. And this is an older librarian woman who probably ain't getting none. I don't know what her sex life is about, but if you have any discomfort with any form of nudity, if a man walks around without his shirt on and you got a problem with that, if a woman has her back out and you a man and you got a problem with that, and ladies, if you see a man with his shirt off, you got a problem with that, that's an indicator of sexual repression. Another way, the way you feel is discomfort when sex scenes appear on TV or in movies. I remember with my ex-wife, there was a scene where we was watching a Wolverine movie, and it was just a love scene where he was kissing the girl. It was passionate, but it wasn't straight up intercourse and nothing like that. It was, this is a PG-13 movie, and my wife is extremely flustered by this, not in a good way, but almost as if she's seeing something that's immoral. It was very disruptive to the movie. She didn't disturb anybody around us, but her energy next to me, it felt very uneasy. I began to get upset with her behavior in response to this stuff because I'm like, I'm not even this sexually repressed, and this is fucked up. And we're married at this time. So you got a problem with people on screen doing it? Come on. And this is why our sex life was fucked up, because of sexual repression. Here's a few more. Shame for having a desire for sex. So if you just feel like I'm horny, I want to have sex, immediately shame comes over you. How dare you even feel that way? That is not the will of God for your life. You're not married. This is for single people, obviously. You have shame for having sexual fantasy. You feel shame for having a wet dream. They even make men feel bad about this. So there's a Bible verse in the Old Testament that talks about if a man it's a nocturnal emission, basically. Basically, if he goes to sleep and he wakes up and he's ejaculated on himself, he's unclean. How is he unclean? He just bust on himself. He wash it off and move on. Why is he has to now unclean? He's a bad person, or he has to sit somewhere for a while. This is them just saying that this is wrong. Like you fucked up. You came on yourself? Oh my God. So now semen is dirty? It's unclean? Do anybody know what's inside semen? A bunch of proteins and a bunch of other DNA that makes life. There is nothing unclean about semen. But here come the church and the Bible talking about you unclean because you got some ejaculate on you from a fantasy dream that you had. Come on, man. Another thing is the embarrassment when looked at by the opposite sex, even if you find them attractive. Now, I can say that some people are not attractive and they're looking at you. You can ugh, I feel embarrassed. But the fact that you are embarrassed is an indication of sexual repression. This happened to me often because I can recognize when women are attracted to me. I understand the body language and things like that. And in some cases, I would feel embarrassed. I become self-conscious, anxious, and feeling like uneasy. And it's just a woman saying, oh, I like what I see. Another one is fear of attraction from the opposite sex. Because sexual energy is mysterious to you, it seems sinful. So once again, back to that. Some women can feel like this guy's looking at me, he's attracted to me, and he's projecting sexual energy. He may even be thinking about sex when he's looking at her. And she can feel that. And when she feels that energy, she gets a fear. And this is sexual, and I was told sex was wrong, and so he's looking at me in a way that is sexual, so he's doing something wrong. He's sinful. I'm at fault that I must be wearing something that is causing him to stumble, quote unquote. You see? And all this shit is going down because of this repression. It's a fucked up thing. Embarrassment when recognizing someone is attracted to you and it's mutual. Okay? That was one of my biggest struggles, and that was put on me long ago when I was in my late teens or so. I'd say mid-teens, early teens or whatever. But when I was going to church, I remember connecting with a girl. We both had a mutual thing. It was beyond friendship. And we just would talk, and one day she gave me her number, and my dad found out some kind of way, told me to tear it up, and pretty much shamed me for even getting her number. Now, I never asked for a number. She just gave it to me. But she was attempting to bring us together closer. We could talk on the phone. Maybe we could connect outside of the church or the Kingdom Hall, as they call it, the place we visited. And I was attracted to her. She was attracted to me. And it was a mutual thing. And that was immediately cut off. And that programmed me to feel like any mutual attraction that I had after that was somehow wrong. Okay, and he told me the reason later on. He said, I didn't want you having sex. So you cut off a relationship that could have been used to help me understand women. Like, this is necessary. Men and women young men and women, with boys and girls, need to connect with one another, to learn one another. And for you to tear that off for fear of me having sex, you ain't got no business monitoring my sex life. But this is religion making him do this shit. And that fucked me up. And later on, when I'm out and about and I see a woman that I'm mutually attracted to and she's showing the same thing, this feeling I get that is one, embarrassment. I might even frown a little bit. And I know I'm doing it. And so that makes me even more, I guess, ashamed of myself because it's like I'm fucking up. I hate this program that runs every time I see an attractive woman and she finds me attractive. Like, damn, And I hate this shit. It comes from religion. It's sexual repression. And once again, like I said, it's sex starts way before intercourse, way before foreplay. Just flirting, just talking to another human being that you find attractive can be hindered by sexual repression. So it can go further than that. When they flirt with you, you can feel like, oh my God, something's terribly wrong now. And that's happened to me as well. I remember a Starbucks barista was an older woman who was kind of cute. She was flirting with me. I would come in, she would say these things to me. She bought me a drink at one point. I was at another Starbucks. She came in to get some supplies for the Starbucks she worked at, and she spoke with me. And I actually left Starbucks that she was working at because I felt uncomfortable, just because she was flirting with me. And she wasn't doing anything harmful. She wasn't being rude or nothing. And here I am not being able to deal with the energy of a woman liking me. It was foul as hell. And I'm like, damn, man, this fucking sexual repression shit. And I didn't know at the time what it was, and if you end up flirting back, you could then later on feel embarrassed afterward because you feel like, what am I doing? I was engaging in flirtation, sexual talk with the opposite sex. See, this is sexual repression. It's fucked, man. And it hinders everything. So finally, let's go over some actions that you will see in your life if you're, sexually repressed. Here's some of the actions. You will shame sexual expression of any kind. So if somebody is masturbating, you will make fun of that. You will shame that. Two people having sex, you hear about it over here, you'll shame that. You're intolerant towards any form of sexual expression. So art, you see any type of nudity in art, anybody is dressing in a way that is sexual. Music, that was a big thing. I mean, any music that came on the radio, we were told we couldn't listen to it because it was singing about sex. I remember my dad, there was a scene in a movie called The Fifth Element, and I can't name the girl's, her name was Milla in real life, but it's a scene in this movie where she's in the background taking her shirt off, and she's, her nipples are out or whatever, but she had such a small chest, there was nothing really to see. And I remember me, my brother, and my mother and my father were watching this, and my dad immediately turns off the damn video. And we're like, what the hell? And then he turns to me, he won't discuss it. He won't discuss, but it was because her breasts were out in the background. She's not jiggling the titties all on the camera. She's not playing with herself with her shirt off. It's nothing, and it's just nudity, but this is sexual repression. This is what happens to you. This is how you start to feel about things. Porn obviously is a big deal. They look at porn as the worst thing on the planet. If you're sexually repressed, you will label sex as dirty, bad, or wrong. And this is even things that have just reached into the vernacular of people who are not sexually repressed, like doing the nasty, or you're dirty, or you're a slut. When they having sex, they'll be saying all this stuff. That comes from the church. Sex is not dirty. It's not bad. It's not filthy. But this is what has become of sex because of the Catholic Church and other religions. All right? And so you're unable to speak about sex in direct terms. This is like my father. He would never talk about it directly. He just cut the video off. I guess he made it run so that part would go off. And I remember another time it was worse. It was a scene where there's a chick, she just popped up on the scene. It was a strip club, some space strip club or something. And there's a woman shaking her titties, and she had these beautiful, round, full set of titties. Her nipples were protruding out. It was a beautiful thing, just a beautiful thing. She got to shaking them, and it was just that, bare-chested, and he immediately cut the video off, ended the whole movie, and walked off. He didn't talk to us about it, nothing. He didn't play the movie ever again after that. This is how you are when you sexually repressed. I'm like, damn, really? Some titties? They're titties, man. They're titties. So secrecy surrounding sex and sexuality in the family. Nobody want to talk about it. We can't speak about sex. We can't talk about it. Excessive interest in sex. Now, this is a big one. So if you catch anybody who's religious always talking about sex and how dirty and wrong it is and condemning it, they're sexually repressed. Why are you talking about it so much? Why are you always talking about sex? Why are you always analyzing the latest movie that somehow features sex? Why are you always talking about it? Because they're so interested in it. They're drawn to it because they're sexual beings. Here's another thing that you do when you are sexually repressed. You avoid all images and people that could cause you arousal. And so this is something I was doing as a so-called man of God back in the day to avoid masturbation and sexual arousal. When I see a woman that was sexually appealing, for most men, it don't take no more than half a second to scan a woman up and down from a distance to recognize that she's attractive. And usually what people do is once they see that, they take another look and another look and another look and another look and another look because it's so attractive. her body, her face, her hair, how she's carrying herself, what she's wearing. This is so attractive. So we knew, as so-called men of God, to avoid looking at such women. If there was a billboard with a sexually attractive woman on it, we would not look at that billboard. We would train our eyes not to look. And, it's a form of sexual repression. You're trying not to experience arousal. And if you do catch yourself staring, you end up feeling ashamed. Oh my God, I was looking at her boobs the whole time, and I looked at her butt, and I just feel so ashamed now. I was in sin. Oh my God. This is what happens to you. Now, at one point, this shit backfired on me real hard, because some woman gonna catch your eye, and because you've been repressing your sexuality for so long, trying your best not to look at sexual images of women or women in real life, eventually you're gonna get caught. So what happened to me, I remember I was at Belle Isle in Detroit, and there were some cheerleaders doing something for whatever, but they had the forms on them, the chicks, big old round behinds and thick thighs or whatever. And one of them caught my eye, and here I am, I've been free from masturbation for about, 3 months at this point. I went home and jacked off. I just was so overcome by this woman's body that I ended up losing my streak, and because you can't help but, and it's just some thighs and a butt, and she just being herself out there. And I think nobody would explode like that. But for somebody like myself, who is hiding from sex all the time, this is sexual repression. Like, you built up energy. And so, like I said, eventually, you can't help it. Another form of sexual repression is, and the action that people take, is extreme modesty. So I've seen women, particularly my ex-wife at one point, covering up her nipples. So she would put tape on her nipples so that they wouldn't protrude from under the shirt. Women would wear clothes that don't highlight their figure or any of their features that would cause a man to stumble, quote unquote. So women are taught that it's their responsibility to keep a man from lusting. And so they have to wear these clothes that don't highlight their body. And so a lot of baggy stuff that's not that attractive. And so if you see a woman wearing extremely modest clothes, most likely she has some form of sexual repression in some cases, okay? Now, some women are just playing a role and they're a freak. But if you see a woman consistently wearing stuff that just, like, she don't show off her body, she doesn't, I know she got some cakes up under that, it's an indicator of she feels she has to be modest, and she probably grew up under some religious, sexually oppressive environment. Now, when you actually get down to having sex, and this is finally, we're going to get to the end here, when you have consensual sex, you have difficulty enjoying yourself. Even though you're free to have it, especially if you're a religious person and you're married, even though you're free to have it, you just can't enjoy it that much. Why? Because they taught long ago, too much pleasure is a sin. Another thing which happened to me on my wedding night was something called Vaginismus. And that's when the woman's vagina will not open. And if you do get in there, it's painful for her. And we had this issue, I guess I would say about 2 months into the marriage. So wedding night, I couldn't even enter. The door was locked. Okay. Eventually we bought some, they're not sex toys, but they're different sizes of entry tools to open up the vagina. So here's a small one, you put that in, kind of slide that in a little bit, and then you take it out, put another one in, and eventually you get up to the bigger size, which is the size of a male penis. And then we were able to have intercourse, and still pain, and until that subsided, and then we were able to have sex. Even within that, it was a lot of need for lubrication. Now, there could have been other reasons for that, but vaginismus is a real thing, and it's usually connected to sexual repression. Sex is supposed to be pleasurable. It shouldn't be painful at all. The vagina should be wet, very well lubricated on its own. You shouldn't need external lubrication unless she has a medical problem. So the body is basically saying, hey, it's wrong to have sex. Don't let this penis go inside your vagina. And so it's doing that. It's trying to keep you out. And even though the woman may want to have sex, her body's been programmed. Her subconscious has been programmed to deny entry. Here's another one. When you're having sex, you're unable to go deep sexually with your partner. And I'm not talking about stroking deep, but on a spiritual and mental level, you stay on the surface for fear of losing yourself in ecstasy, but also connection. See, you don't want to connect because you feel like this deep connection and now all that pleasure is somehow taking you away from God. That's sexual repression at work, preventing you from having the best experience, the full experience that you deserve. Another thing that happens is minimal or limited arousal and erections. And some would say, oh, this is erectile dysfunction. Technically, it could be called that, but I remember just how I know my size of my penis, but then there's this limited size that happens sometimes. I'm like, why? I know my shit gets harder and bigger than this. Why is it this size now when I'm having sex? That's connected to sexual repression. So your penis size could be, say, 7 inches, right? But it only maxes out at like 5.5, and it's not that hard. What's up with that? Now, we could say, oh, it's a blood flow issue. You need to go to the doctor. There's a bunch of other reasons. Maybe you're not sexually aroused by your partner, but it could also be connected to sexual repression, meaning your body is not trying to have this full experience. It's not trying to be super aroused because it doesn't want to get deep into sex like that. It doesn't want to have a good time. So you get this semi-erect penis that can enter in but not really get the work done, you know? And so for the women, they won't be as wet because of repression. And then, of course, at the end of all of this, there's guilt and negative feelings after sex or masturbation. You know, sex is just not going to be that pleasurable because of this repression. That's the case. That's the case of what we're dealing with. And it's fucked. It's fucked up. But if you listen to my next broadcast on this, you'll find ways of fixing all of this and experiencing sex the way you should and being free. So stay tuned to next time. If you like this broadcast, I want you to like it, share it, comment, rate this podcast, and continue to listen and stay subscribed. Yeah, have a good day.